Right then. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to talk about two-tier Keir Starmer and what he says about two-tier policing here in the UK. Mr. Starmer has said categorically that two-tier policing doesn't exist in the UK.
That's a lie.
That it is just a fiction, a malicious complaint led by a bunch of racists. As if, for instance, the rest of us can't see or think for ourselves. The great leader has pronounced the idea that two-tier policing doesn't exist, and apparently he seems to think that that's the end of the argument. And if you disagree, they've tried to implicitly suggest that the police might be knocking on your door. This is walking into a soft, Trudeau-esque, Canadian-style tyranny. If two-tier policing doesn't exist, we shouldn't be able to point out examples of its existence. We shouldn't be able to see examples of its existence. And yet we do. Consider how the Black Lives Matter riots were policed in comparison to the Enough is Enough riots. How one group was policed softly by a police force that sought to acquiesce to the demands of the mob. How our political class were not so strong in their language about how they would tackle the problem, versus the baton charges, the dogs, and the strong words of two-tier Keir in response to the Enough is Enough protests. Remember, during the Black Lives Matter protest, how there was attempted murder on the streets outside of Waterloo Station that was acknowledged by the media, and yet we did not see the full force of the law land on those that were inciting those riots, inciting the violence, nor upon those perpetrating it. Consider how the police dealt with the riots in Leeds, Harefields, in comparison to the riots of the Enough is Enough protests. How the police ran away. How Keir Starmer did not come out and say that the full force of the law would be brought to bear on those responsible for the violence in Leeds, which included setting buses on fire, violence against police officers, turning over police cars, and so on. Consider how Nick Lowell's of the hate group Hope Not Hate spread a malicious rumour, misinformation, that a Muslim woman had had acid thrown upon her, inciting Muslim mobs to come onto the streets carrying weapons, and how those same Muslim mobs that were carrying knives and machetes and hammers in the street were not tackled by the police. Indeed, we have a community officer on record telling the mob carrying weapons if they could kindly dispose of their weapons at the nearby mosque. And consider, ladies and gentlemen, how the very same working class communities that we have seen protesting and rioting on the streets have been subject to 40 years of Muslim grooming gangs industrially raping their children, whilst the elites did nothing, whilst they brushed it under the carpet, whilst the police arrested fathers and grandfathers who were raising complaint about these Muslim grooming gangs, and how the Labour councils and the Labour councillors tried to dismiss it, and how the mainstream media tried to present it that these underage children were just selling themselves into prostitution.
Well, why don't you address the far right,
ladies and gentlemen?
Bob, address the far right.
I'm doing my own speech, bro.
Come on, Bob.
Now,
You're being biased,
ladies and gentlemen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out that Two-Tier Keir Starmer was head of the Crown prosecution for a good number of those 40 years. The reason why Minor Starmer, our great leader, our Führer, can't see a problem of two-tier policing is because he has been institutionally part of the problem of two-tier policing, two-tier judiciary, and two-tier media reporting in this country for his entire political career, ladies and gentlemen. He has presented to the British people a thesis. He has said on public record that two-tier policing does not exist. Fine. Let him defend that thesis in a debate against Douglas Murray or against Nigel Farage.